Okay, good evening and welcome and thank you for joining us. If you didn't get a chance to grab some refreshments and snacks over there, please feel free to do that and get settled for the lecture for this evening. Again, good evening and thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to welcome you all and also to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Rozana Montiel, who will deliver a lecture as part of our lecture series Engaging Pluralism for this year. Following her lecture, she will also be joined by our own Professor Carlos Jimenez here, who will provide a few words of wisdom and reflection following Rozana's lecture, and, as well as kick off the very first question of the evening. Rozana is the founder of the Estudio de Arquitectura in Mexico City. She was trained as an architect internationally, both in Mexico as well as in Catalonia. She's exhibited and published widely and globally, I would say, including an installation that she did at the Venice Biennale called To Stand Ground. She's also been accomplished as a designer and an architect, and like some of our own faculty members here at Rice, she also won one of the Emerging Voices Award in Architecture from the Architectural League of New York. She's a really wonderful and very inspiring designer, but also maker of books and publications, including a very beautiful small pink publication that she produced on public spaces in between housing that tries to tell the story of housing, both through drawings, photographs, design, but also small reflections and anecdotes of the residents, even told through Post-it notes. And as such nuanced designer and thinker, I think she's a wonderful contributor to our collective conversation here in the school about how do we engage pluralism as architects in the world today. So without much more ado, please join me in welcoming Rozana to Rice Architecture. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Igor, Carlos, Rice University, and everyone who has been helping to bring me here. So, well, I named today the lecture Cutting the Act, and I will be telling you why I chose this name. And first, I would like to start with this question that I have been lately asked. So they ask me, where do you find inspiration? Do you have role models, female ones? So when they asked me this question the other day, I was trying to think who was my inspiration, who were my role models, were they females? And, well, I come to realize that I have been inspired more by artists than by architecture. But at the time that I studied architecture, I tried to remember female models, and I remember Lina Bobardi, of course, but there were very few. But I remember very well Remedios Varo. I don't know if you know Remedios Varo. She's a Spanish painter, which she was a refugee from the war from Spain, so she came to live to Mexico. She's a surrealist painter, and luckily, my father was an art collector, and he had a painting. So this is the painting that we had at our house. And it was really interesting because in another interview, they asked me, how did Remedios Varo really inspired me? And it was really interesting because, and I always say that, I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe that the painting was right in the floor below where I slept. So I always thought that in my dreams, I was thinking of Remedios Varo and all these artifacts and all her alchemy, her mysticism, her surrealist ideas, which really inspire me with time. And not only Remedios Varo, but there has been a lot of women who have inspired me, and this is Nahui Olin. Nahui Olin her name is Carmen Mondragon, and she was a painter, a poet. She was a progressist woman who really believed. She was born in the late 800s, and so in the beginning of the last century, she was the muse of Dr. Atl, also a Mexican painter. They were like in love. They live in the roof of the center, like in a very secret way. She was much younger. And this is a painting from Dr. Atl. So this is Naui Olin and Dr. Atl. And so imagine at the time, at the like 20s, she was posing nude. That for that time it was impossible. She was also like photographed and painted by many artists. And she was a very resilient woman. And she lived here in this house in Mexico City. And now is my office. So this story is really nice because, like suddenly when I came and came to this building and I really like it, and I heard that the story that Naui Olin used to live there. And now this building has like a lot of story because it's on the upper floor. It's a place where an artist works, a woman artist. In the middle, it's our office. And on the ground floor, it's a restaurant. So this also talks about the idea of how plural we are in Mexico City. We love to work and, like have all these mixed uses in the things that we do. We like to draw. I think that, and I always say that redrawing for me, it's starting to transform reality. And so this is the office where we work, just to show you. And I like to show you this because also it's very inspiring, this space, because it's where, just to show you these photos, the window. It's a very small space, but we have like remodeled it to become like really big, really open with a lot of light. And to continue with that idea, what do we do in the office? And before when I heard about the name of the lecture, Engaging Pluralism, I started looking, like in what does pluralism means? It's very obvious, no? We all know it's like the opposite of singular, it's more than one. But then I start searching in philosophy, what does it mean, in metaphysics, in ontology, in epistemology, in logic. I like in logic, no? There is not one correct logic. And what it's, for me, REA, it's Rozana Montiel Estudio de Arquitectura, short. So what's pluralism for me? So it's connection, collectivity, coexistence, community that relates with the idea of inclusion, visibility, interdisciplinarity, and diversity. So that's why I bring also the ideas of Naui Olin. So if Remedios Varo is a dreamer which has inspired me, Naui Olin has inspired me with his resilience in life. And what do we do in the office? So this is a chart we were drawing, and so we in the office work with art, with research, with private and public spaces. We do not make a difference between each one of them. We're always working on the four of them, or we're always trying to work on four of them. Why? Because I think that one like really helps the other to become and bring better projects. So when we start doing this, we said, okay, so what do we do with public projects? And this is the type of projects that we do when we work with public. And yesterday I was speaking with Carlos, and it was really interesting because he was saying me that many times the programs that they give us are not the usual ones. So we're really interested to, for example, I don't have a pointer, but just to do one more room on the top of a roof, or also like do these highway models in the highway government in Mexico City. It's really tough, it's really tiring, it's very bureaucratic. And so now I'm trying to work with public projects, but through privates. So, for example, these have been done. So we created a manifesto in the office. I know that Houston is also very big, but you have a lot of green space. No? In Mexico, it's all built. And Mexico has also like these many layers, which are really, really interesting, which can be like the pre-Hispanic, and then the colonial, the modern. This is Tlatelolco, which is very, very interesting because you can see how these three eras interweave. And so this is the center of Mexico. And I would like to start with the project that it's called Blank in 3 Acts. And it's an exhibition that I was invited to do in the Museum of San Ildefonso in the center of Mexico City, which is one of the most important museums in Mexico. It was a former school where Frida Kahlo studied, Octavio Paz studied, so very, very important and renowned artists and writers and people studied there in the center. And also it's all where there are a lot of murals of Orozco, so if you go through the corridors, you can see all the murals from different artists. So this is Blank in 3 Acts, and this is how I relate art and architecture. So I was invited, as I said before, and when they invited me to do an architecture exhibition, I started thinking, how can I do an exhibition that can be different, that can not be the same or typical as we all know exhibitions of architecture almost all the times are done. And so I thought, what's the simplest way to do it, the low cost, recycling things. So these are recycled white sheets, which I decided to cover up all the walls of the exhibition hall I was given. And then we were taking out papers, and we hand drew around 50 projects of the office. So we put all the drawings on the floor, and we were going to take out all the papers, to start putting the drawings when the pandemic came. And they shut down the doors of the museum 2 days before we put all the drawings and completed the exhibition. And so the museum was shut as we were all shut down with the pandemic. And after a year, I asked the museum if I could go and see how was the space. The space had been shut down. I imagined that all the white sheets were on the floor, torn down, yellow. I didn't know what to expect. And when they opened the door, I found this. And it was more beautiful than ever. The dust on the floor, and the paper was not really clean and clear, but it was really beautiful. It had time had passed on these papers, but they were beautiful. Just one sheet fell down. It was really, really beautiful. And they told me, why don't you come and continue with the exhibition? But I said, well, all the drawings, you have to look closer to the drawings to really feel the exhibition. So I said no, but I think that it's the perfect space to do a dance, to do something really different, to work with different disciplines. This is also very important for the office, to work with different disciplines all the time. So I invited 2 dancers and a musician to do an act. And so that's why I call it Blank in 3 Acts. So what was good about the pandemic is that the exhibition changed. I had to move to another hall, but I recycle all the papers, so all the papers are recycled. You will see how I recycle them. And then this is the first one. It's called Inhabit the Void. And as you can see here, I'm going to show you. The idea was that it's called Blank in 3 Acts because it's the blank sheets, 3 acts. The first act is Inhabit the Void, which is a video with the dancers that tell you the story when we came in, the one that I was telling you. But how can you get inspired to start the creative act? So I'm here trying to think how am I going to start a project, which we all know how we suffer many times when the idea doesn't come, when there are too many ideas, when there's a catharsis, then you have the idea and you feel more comfortable and you're happy and you say, Eureka, I find something that I like. So that's the process of the creative act, which is the first act. And that introduces you to the idea of how the papers were also dancing with the dancers, because I just taped the papers on the top. So once you moved, and it's the photograph that it's the poster, once you move, the paper was moving with you also. It was really, really beautiful. So here I will, oh, I don't know if we have sound here. Let me just, do you know how can I turn on the audio or? Excuse me? We didn't test it. So. Oh, we didn't test it. So. I think you can. Let's see if we can hear. Oh, but I think it's really important to hear the sound. If I take it out, I can, or it will take a lot of time. And I have another video too. Well, it's really important. Maybe after, when we finish, I can pass it, no? So we don't lose time here. So it was really nice how it moved, the sound of the paper, and then how it ended. So this is the second act, which are all models with paper and all the drawings. You can see here part of the models, everything in paper. And the third act was the manifesto. So we went from the abstract to the concrete, we went from the monochromatic to the color, and here you could see the projects already built. So here you can see the 3 acts, and this is like the drawing of the meta-narrative that we called, which are the sheets flying, putting on the wall, the drawings, and then how it became a book or the manifesto. Here. And this is when we took out all the paper, it came like this. We did all these booklets. And so we have now booklets that have like many of the drawings, and many are white sheets. So now we have a lot of booklets that we are giving to different schools. We have our own booklets at the office, etc. So I think that this was a no-cost exhibition that you can transport very easy to many places, because you just have to print the drawings and put it depending on the space that you have. And here is how it moved. And so here, like continuing with this idea of the line, it's how our ideas begin with the act of delineation. And so with a simple line, we talk about walls, about this separation, but when we transform this line, this vertical line into a horizontal, it becomes a roof. And instead of separating, it unites, it connects, or a common ground, how this line can become a ground and it becomes common again. Or it can become a bridge which connects also, or it can become a slide and it becomes a playground. So this is what we have been doing in rehabilitating public space. So these are the post-its that Igor was saying. These are the graphic aphorisms that we drew for rehabilitating public spaces. We did it before. We did it when we were doing the projects and after. So what did we learn about all these rehabilitations? And we did this book, Common Spaces in Housing Units, where we were using the graphic aphorisms, but we were also trying to generate space through typography. So water has this line in diagonal, which it simulates rain, and we put points in different layers so you can think about topography, etc. And so I will now tell you about these projects of rehabilitating public spaces. Common Unity has been a very important project at the office. It was one of our first projects for rehabilitating public space. It's in San Pablo, Jalpa, in the north part of Mexico City, where 7,000 inhabitants live there. And when we find it, when we went to see this space, we found out that everything was gated. Every single square meter was gated. Even the cars were gated. And so it was really impressive because they told us, okay, so you can do whatever you want, but you cannot touch the gates. And so we were saying, well, we almost have no space if we don't touch the gates. So we were trying to see how we could convince the community to take out the gates. And again, like this is very important for common unity. We changed the vertical for the horizontal, the vertical that separates to the roof that finds and makes something in common, and that's why we call it common unity. So the space was this, and we transform it into this. And the community, after seeing what we were doing, they wanted to take out all the gates. So 95% of the gates were taken by the community. We had to ask for more budget because we didn't have enough budget for the floor, for everything, once the community wanted to open the space. And if you can see how it was open, and when you open it, it was more secure. People think that gates are the way that you can secure something, but in this case, it was the opposite. Why it was the opposite? Because the people were hiding behind the gates. There was not enough light at night, and people felt very insecure to cross even there. And once you open the space, we brought obviously light, but the space felt much more secure. So this is how. And like we were talking to the people there, and they said, well, we felt that we moved to another place. Like this, we cannot believe that you're giving us this. And it's something so simple. It's just a structure that includes games. This is how the gates were taken out by the community. And this is a very simple structure with, as I said before, with games, multifunctional. Now people gather. Before, they even didn't know each other. Now they sweep the floor. Now they gather. This was a saloncito, which was before, which had no light, which was in the middle of the cars, and we changed it into this. In the same exact area, we saw that there was a small patio, a very small patio, so we opened and brought light in it, and it completely changed the idea of being an old shed, and very dark shed, to this light library. And so, as you can see, the many activities that now are being done. I have a very interesting anecdote that the Architectural League of New York, like 15 architects came to Mexico, and they wanted to visit different places, different architecture, obviously Luis Barragan and Kalach Library and everything. And they told me, well, we want to visit Common Unity. And I said, well, okay, you're visiting like Barragan's houses and you're visiting Kalach Library, but okay, so I took them there. And I said, 4 of the patios were remodeled, and there were others that couldn't be remodeled because we didn't have enough budget. So I took them first for the ones that were not remodeled to see how it was before, to experience the idea of how you felt when you were there. And so I was taking them there, and suddenly, as I said before, there were like 5 or 6 guys, young guys, very drunk, very high, and they came out and they started saying, give us your cameras, give us your camera. And I was really scared, I was like, oh, I'm with 15 people from New York, and these guys are coming out and telling me, and I was like speaking in Spanish, I'm like, I'm sorry, we're just going. So they say, okay, go away. And we were really frightened. I was really frightened that something could happen to them. And we were like not welcome at all. We were like pushed away. They were hiding in these gates. And then, okay, I said, okay, now let's go to the other ones. And when we arrived, there were balloons. There were all these grandmothers with the kids. There was going to start a party of some girls, and they were saying, oh, do you want to join the party? Do you want to drink something? You can eat, you can join us. Everybody was like really impressed. So more than what can architecture do with very, very simple things with low cost? It's like the change, the social change. This was really, really important. They were and Anne Rieselbach, she told me, did you do this? Like, did you prepare this? And I was like, no way, how am I gonna prepare this? But she was really impressed that how can one space really reject you, push you out, and how the other space, like with very, very simple things, welcome you, open, and feel that everybody felt secure, everybody was drinking water and refreshments there, we were joining the party, and so it was really, really impressive, what happened that day. So this other project court is in Veracruz in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is how we have been building. This is not a Photoshop, it's a real photo, and we have been building this type of public housing, social housing for the last 30 or 25 years in Mexico. And if you can see here, like there's no public space, there's no identity, everything is similar. We give space for the cars only, no? Like the very big space for cars, as here in Houston also. No sidewalks, no public space. And so this area, which you can see green, it's gonna be full of houses. 25,000 inhabitants are gonna live here. And we saw that the space was like this, no? It was really impressive. They just asked us for a roof, and we tried to give them more as a community center. And imagine in Veracruz, it rains a lot and it's very hot weather. And vegetation grows amazingly. And imagine a public space without any vegetation. It was like incredible because nobody was there. Nobody could be there during the day and not even during the night. And so we did this. No? First, we thought about the vegetation. So now the vegetation is really big. And then we thought about this roof. But how can we put more program into this roof? So we went out of the roof, we put the vegetation, and in between the columns, we put all the program. So it was really interesting to see how we could gain height. We can have 2 floors, and these 2 floors could have a lot of activities: bathrooms, library, a computer room, even, like obviously they could use it all night. And here are all the kids playing. Even a biologist went there and taught about medicinal plants. And so court became very active at the time, and now, well, it has changed a lot. So Fresnillo Playground is another one of a rehabilitation of public space in Zacatecas, in the northern center of Mexico, which there are 102 buildings. It's very, very dangerous. It's one of the most dangerous states in Mexico with all this violence. And so here is the space that we were given. And also it had a very important barrier. Like before the gates were the barriers. Here the barrier was this bridge where you couldn't cross on the lower floor, you couldn't pass by, and if a stroller or a wheelchair was coming, it couldn't imagine going down and then going up, so it was useless. And also the colors were really, really aggressive, so it was underused, abandoned, and it was insecure. And we did this. We did a bridge that is more than a bridge. We put games in it. It gives shadow. Any wheel, cart, and street vendors can cross with their carts that are really big. And now you can cross underneath and use all the space below. And so it was obvious, because we had already the slopes, to build stairs and slides, and it could become a playground. So where there was nobody, now there are more than 100 kids that come from everywhere to play. And one important thing that we did was changing these aggressive colors that you can see here, which were terrible. We made a different palette, an earthen palette, and we changed it into this. So also people thought that they had changed a place just by changing colors. So how can we use very, very simple elements that can really transform the whole area into something different, no? So I always say that change begins with a change of perception. So here are the kids going down, and there's always very important that Lalo, there's a leader that can bring all the kids to play, to dance, but also to think about, for example, here there's a problem of trash. They throw everything everywhere. There's no civism in there. And Lalo has been teaching them to not throw waste everywhere. And these are the kids, very happy with having a playground and having a place to be. And this next project, which is new, we just finished this year, it's called Pilares. And well, all these projects, we have been doing them with Infonavit. Infonavit is the institution that funds housing for workers. And Carlos Cedillo, an architect and friend, he invited me to do like around 20 projects with Infonavit before. And now Carlos has his own firm, it's called Piensa Sostenible, and he is like he works as an intermediate, like a gestor, like a mediator, which invites architects to work with the government. So he invited like 30 architects to do these pilares, which pilares are these innovation centers for like community centers for culture, education, sports, and all of them are done in vulnerable areas in Mexico City and in underused plots. Now there are around 300 pilares in Mexico, but only like 25 were done by architects. And this is, our plot is in Iztapalapa. Iztapalapa is the most dense municipality in Mexico. It has around 2 million people, and it has almost no public space, so it's really, really dense. And so our plot is just on the corner where the street market is. As you can see how dense it is and how few trees or vegetation are there. And this is our plot. So we had this corner, which was really interesting, and we had these two big trees, two pirules, which were like the main concept for the project, using these trees. And as you can see, this plot was all gated again, so gates everywhere. And we decided that our project, the main idea of the project, were using these trees and doing a plaza that would connect the street and the street market also every Thursday with the pilares, with our pilares. So if you can see these plans, what we tried to do was to open the space, change barriers into open boundaries, and start with a plaza, with a public plaza that anyone can enter there. And then because of security and because this area is very, very insecure, it's hermetic, but inside it's very open. So you have the plaza, you will see that it's open, and then we have on the sides, it's closed. But in between the spaces that you can see here, we have cross ventilation and we have these patios, which are like this sequence of spaces that unite, and this idea of open and close, interior and exterior. And on the second floor, they asked us to put sports area, and because we had a very small plot, we put it on the second floor, as you will see. So here is the street market connected to the plaza. This is the facade, which is close to the exterior, as you can see, and the patio. And then here is the entrance, the plaza. Here, now they open, they have more than 90 activities per week. It's very, very full of life. It's very active. It's really impressive to see how it's being used. We use two materials only, these stratified blocks, which give us a lot of shadow and a lot of texture, and these prefabricated concrete blocks on the floor with different textures. We also, for the steel, we use this color, this mauve color, so everything is like in the same palette. And these different patios with the vegetation. So the color, the reddish color with the vegetation really comes well. I was looking at the ampliation that you're gonna do there. And I remember these blocks, no, it remember me. It's different, these are concrete blocks, but I remember this. And so here is how you can see it's being used. Here in the upper level, how the sport, so how can we use every space, even if it's small, to create different activities? So again, this multifunctional space that has a structure that can be used for many things. These are the structure in the second level. When it needed to be a lattice, then it's open to become a lattice. It has like also these bars for kids to play. And I will pass you the video, but it's really sad it doesn't have sound. But Bob, are you gonna put the sound? Yeah. Okay, so thank you. So I'll stop it 1 second so we can. Where? Here? So I'll go back, sorry, to start. This is the plaza with the trees and the market.
Yo le voy a pegar aquí a mi compañera, voy a hacer esto y obviamente como ella tiene...
And so what's really interesting is that many of these kids are sons or daughters of the people that are selling the market. and they used to be there all the time with them, and now they let them free and they let them go into the Pilares, and the kids are free inside the Pilares. No? So it's full of activity, full of life, and it's really, really nice to see it active. And so these two next projects, which are the last projects that I will show you, relate also again with the first ideas of art and architecture, installation, and this is called Stand Ground. It was an invitation to the Venice Biennale in 2018, which this Biennale was called Free Space. And so when they invited me, they gave you 6 meters wide, 6 meters long, and 6 meters tall. We were in the Arsenal, that was it. So we tried to find content in the context that we were given. So this is another point of our manifesto. And so we thought about if we want to change these barriers, which in this case was the wall, into a common ground, how can we bring down the wall and transform it into a floor, and then we could see what was happening outside. And so we put this camera, which it was really, really difficult to do it with the permissions, and no, because you're going to tape and it's not permitted in Venice, and no, we're not going to tape anything. It's just real time what's happening outside. So we did it. Finally, we did it. We were able to do it. And so it was really interesting because while people were moving inside the Arsenale, you were seeing all the life that was outside. And you know all these biennales which are really tiring and long, and once you want to go out and drink a beer in a plaza in Venice. So this was the invitation, no? Let's go outside, let's not stay inside. And again, it's the idea of this connection between interior, exterior, open, close, public space, private space. And, you know, Mauricio Rocha, a Mexican architect, was there. And he didn't believe that this was happening in real time. No, you're kidding me, it's not happening. And then I said, okay. So I called a friend that was outside, and I told her, okay, in 1 minute you're gonna wave, okay, and I'm gonna tell Mauricio to wave, and in a minute you wave, okay. So Mauricio, the architect, so I said, so wave, and you'll see that they're gonna wave, they're gonna say hello to you from outside. And so he was waving, and suddenly my friend started like going like this, no? So it was really interesting how we really blurred these these barriers, connecting virtually, but at the same time it was real. So when is real, what is fiction, when is reality? So we're always working in this, also in this in-between space, between what's real and what's fiction, but it becomes more interesting, no? So we really reproduce the wall into the floor with the window that you can see here, and there were the old tiles from Venice. It was really interesting because it really looked like if the wall fell down to the floor. And here we also show all the post-its and images of the rehabilitation of public space that relates with this idea that I just told you before. Here you can see, you know, how people are moving at the same time, things happening there. And for the exhibition, Blank in 3 Acts, as I told you before, we drew around 50 projects from the office, and this is one of the drawings. We work, many hands were there. Marie Combet, an amazing illustrator, architect, designer, helped us a lot. And this, I think that this drawing is beautiful because it's really bringing you the city inside, you know, the wall. It's just like this change of perception that I was telling you. And well, lastly, I would like to conclude with this project that connects many ideas that I have been talking about. And it's called Stand Up for the Seas. This project was just presented in May of this year in the Biennale of Architecture and Landscape at Versailles. So it was entitled Our Project Stand Up for the Seas. The installation was located in the Red Dot in Les Petites Écuries du Roi, in the stables of the king, really in Versailles. And we were invited by the curators of one part of the Biennale, which was called Terre Landing Site. And this was with Jana Rebedin and Marie-Hélène Comtal. We were invited 3 architects, one from Jordan, Amar, one from Thailand, Boon, and myself from Mexico. And the points that they were saying that we should really reflect on was the connection between the old world and the new world. And so Terre Landing Site led me to think about the ocean currents, which brought the European ships to American shores. This is how we are all connected, north, south, east, west. No? Like Cristobal Columbus thought that he was going to go to India somewhere else, but he didn't know when he was crossing that America was in between when he discovered America. So it was really interesting to think about how we are all connected. And if when the Europeans came to America, they came by ships and they came through the oceans, we are connected through the oceans. And today we are connected through waste, which is really sad. And so here are the 4, so Mexico, France, Jordan, and Thailand. Here are the ones that participated there. And so Mexico is surrounded by ocean. It has the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the Sea of Cortez. And what has happened is that this current has really brought waste from all parts of the world. So we say here that waste transcends any borders. There are no borders with waste. And garbage from all over the world are in Mexican beaches. So we found garbage from Thailand, from Japan, from Brazil, from everywhere. The currents bring waste into specific 2 places in Mexico, Xcalac in Quintana Roo in the south, and Malarimo in Baja California in the northern part. So what we found was that waste is polluting our oceans, but what most pollutes our oceans are fishing gears and fishing nets. That are the macroplastic. Macroplastic is bigger than 5 millimeters, and microplastic smaller than 5 millimeters. And so all these dots are abandoned they call it ghost nets that are abandoned in the oceans. They call it ghost nets because all the species that are there won't see them because they're very transparent, and they get entangled and they die. So here is how we can see how these species get entangled. And as you can see, these islands of waste are huge. This is the island between Hawaii and California that it's 5 times bigger than France. And it takes a lot of time to cross through these islands of waste. So I say that we live in the age of plastic. These are all plastic that have been picked up in different beaches with different communities. And obviously, small pieces bring bigger problems. So our sands are completely polluted with microplastics. And The Guardian recently published an article which said that our lungs now have microplastics. And not even that, I also read another article that in the Antarctica, the first time the snow came that day, it brought microplastics in it. No, it came from the sky. So we are like really trying to think what we can do with this. So we stand up for the seas. We stand for a position, and that's one of our most important points of the manifesto. We stand for a position in order to reflect and change some of the things that are happening through installations, through biennales. I think that that's a way that we can show how we can transform in a political, in a social, in an ecological way as architects. So the idea was for our installation that had to be 1:1 scale, was to bring a seine net, which is a net that you will see in another image, to bring it in a real scale, and so people will enter and feel trapped, like the fishes and all these fishes in the water feel trapped when they get caught in the net. And so this is the installation. It's the seine net, which has, as you can see, it moved, it was transparent, it was in the patio. But what's really important is that how can we transform waste into a resource? So here is the seine net, and if you can see the scale of the boat, which is really, really small, they put down the net so it becomes invisible, and then you cut everything that you find. And it can be as big as a football team, different type of fishing nets, and people abandon them because if they get trapped with a rock or with a color or something, it's more difficult to take it out, so they prefer to leave it down. And so we did a boat in the scale of the net, which was really a mobile, really, really beautiful with wire. Everything was recycled, even the steel of the structure is recycled metal. The nets were many of them recycled, and they were brought out from the Sea of Cortés, where they were, you know, La Vaquita Marina, which is already in extinction. So these nets came out from trying to stop the Vaquita Marina to extinguish, but it's too late. But well, they were taking out these nets. So this is like the statement of taking out the nets. And what can we do with these nets? So with microplastics and nets, we grinded nets and we did a floor. This was a new experiment, and so if you can see here, all the floor is with grinding nets and microplastics. We did this rhomboid form, so it really looked like scales. It had different colors. It came out like that. It was really, really impressive when we saw it, because it was very beautiful to see like the different textures on the floor. It looked like if you were standing on the sea. And here is the scale of the boat with the nets. And we did these panels, also 12 panels with waste that was recollected by different communities during 7 years. And each panel has their own story. And we drew everything again, like hand drawing and telling the story, very, very simple. So how can we change many of the ideas in a very simple, ludic way? Here are the people picking up all the garbage. Here. And so the idea is that let's not be caught in the nets, but be caught in the act of a resourceful cycle. And I like to say that changing the ordinary into something extraordinary requires commitment. One must see the banal side of life with creativity and an active gaze. Playfulness plays a fundamental role in the work that we do. And it is directed to everyone, not only to kids. So this is how we create a different form of reality which can immediately activate critical thinking. So after all these ideas, I conclude by saying that in this world where the age of plastic is a reality, we can take a stand and create a new history that could connect us all through resilient currents of thoughts. By weaving sharp ideas in alignment with the environment, we will build a more righteous place for the future. Thank you very much. Yes, can I play the video? It's just 1 minute, so you can hear it. Thank you. Let me just go back. This is just a teaser. The video really lasts 8 minutes, so just a teaser. So we can do an image here.
Oh, okay. Is it working? Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, Rozana, Concetta, with Z, thank you for being with us and sharing your wonderful and inspiring work. I say inspiring because I saw another side of your work that I hadn't seen before, and I was hoping for more those wonderful architectural jewels that you have created through your practice. And for the audience, there's this wonderful invention in her office where they place a house on top of a rooftop, or they find a disregarded corner and it becomes a lively corner. We saw evidence of that, but I don't lament not seeing that, but I was very taken by a couple of issues that you raised in your lecture. One of them is this idea of defining the meaning of a word. You know, I still think that the most powerful beginning of any architecture it begins with a word, not a drawing. The word is so powerful, and when you use the word act, and you try to define the word act into activity, into activism, it reminds us all as designers that in fact we should know how to choose our words and carefully choose them and make them into action. I was very gladdened for Maggie and Igor and I that we sat down to plan this lecture series, and you took the care to understand the meaning of pluralism to the extent that you exhausted our definition of pluralism, but you also opened other definitions. And so I think that I say this to the benefit of all students here, that sometimes to really take to task the word itself is a powerful instrument that architects often don't regard because they speak casually. Or I often argue with students, what do you mean steel? Brush? Shiny? What are the adjectives that allow you to claim the meaning of that word? So that's one aspect. The second aspect of your talk, which really I thought it's wonderful when a child is inspired by, like Rosario Barros and Remedio Barros, Remedio, wonderful name, by the way. I don't know how to translate it, which means remedy. Remedy. And it also means, it's like a measuring device. But anyway, to be inspired by this painting, and later to be inspired by the idea that indeed rehabilitation, the idea that the public realm has been decimated by the greed of our cities, the greed of our politicians, the greed of our developers. And somehow what we're left with is to rehabilitate, to recompose, to heal, to regenerate. And I think that we saw a couple of your exemplary projects, and I will encourage the students and colleagues alike to see more of Rozana Montiel's Estudio de Arquitectura projects where they deal with that. And it's just so fantastic to see that regeneration. And I will end with one thing before I open the dialogue with questions, to say that this connection to the words and this connection to public space comes from a deep understanding and love of people. And it was visible to me in your, especially in the small cameos, where the architectural photograph suspends all belief and suddenly is activated by people. Mm-hmm. And it reminds us also, and I want to thank you for the inspiration, because we often forget who we're designing for. And so that is a gift that you brought us from south or north. I don't know where the world turns this way, but thank you. And with those words, I just want to open the conversation to whoever, and Scott as alphabetically, Scott Coleman, so please.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. The work is kind of really fantastic. I had a question about Polaris. Is an institution a government institution, or is it a community institution? Like who owns it or who runs it? And did it exist before the design project, or did you bring them in? I was just wondering kind of how that worked.
Sure. So it's an initiative of the government of Mexico City, with Claudia Sheinbaum, which is now the mayor of the city. She started this, and Carlos Cedillo, this architect, was invited to invite 25 architects to do these different pilares. So there's like almost 300 around Mexico City, but like 25 done by architects. The other ones are more like just they remodel some space, but there's no architecture on it. There's no spatiality, there's no light, there's no to say what's the difference between a design of an architect and the ones that are done in other spaces, no?
Is there a programmatic? Do they come with the sense of what the program is to be before you?
Yes. They have studied long time the needs of particularly every site, and they repeat many of them. So it has a cyber school, which they teach you computing. It's free, everything is free, and they have 90 different activities. But it has a cyber school, it has a gastronomy area, it has an orchard, it has jewelry, photography, dance classes, yeah.
I wanted to follow up on Carlos' second comment, because I'm not so satisfied with the idea of healing as beautiful as it is, and I do think that through your talk it came across in a really sort of clear and beautiful way that somehow the role of the contemporary role of the architect is more about care than anything else. But in the context of Mexico, for instance, where and in the context of discussing, public projects, etc., where it's a country with such a strong tradition, right? Where like a few decades ago, you had architects like Mario Pani who were very deeply embedded with the state, and they were building full neighborhoods, thousands of units, all the cultural and sort of additional support. So basically, the architect was the sort of agent, right, of the creation of the city, and then through the years and through the advent of neoliberalism, the architect was gradually sort of pushed farther and farther to the margins of the production of urban space, right? And so, faced with the reality of a city that is produced by developers without barely any supervision, these initiatives like the ones the projects that you've shown us, where there's an enlightened institution and someone like Carlos Cedillo say, okay, we need to bring the architects back and try to fix this mess. We need these people need public space that they can use. There needs to be some, like a minimum of social and cultural infrastructure that has to happen here, etc. And those are amazing projects and amazing initiatives, but I'm not so happy to accept that our role is just to heal and just to care and somehow try to ameliorate that the basic role of the architect is remedial, right? And I wanted to ask you, what are your feelings towards, if you agree with what I described or not, because maybe I'm wrong, but also what are your feelings? Do you long for a higher degree of agency, or do you really think that it's sort of morally most adequate that we confine ourselves to care?
Well, first of all, yes, it's right. It happened that, and I was telling you, like, for example, Infonavit started in 1972. And when Infonavit started, they were building a lot of things. And then they stopped building, and the developers took everything and started doing this type of social housing and forgot about public space and everything. And then architects came back again to try, as you said, like, well, I think that care is very important, for sure. And I think more than care, it's just like, I always say that we work with the community, not only for them. And we really listen to the community, but it's not that everything that we listen, it's taken into account. We listen to them, but we give them more. You know, like as architects, we can have, like, we have the potential to understand what they are willing, but to bring a lot of new things and read under different layers, which are not read. But I think to answer, like, well, I don't think, or I don't feel that I'm just aliviando, how is you were saying? Ameliorating things that were already done, and then you have to solve it because they were done in a bad way, and now how do we do it? I think that it's part of our daily life, and it's part of what, for example, Mexico is and how it is. And there are many, many underused spaces, which, why not activate them? There are many, many buildings that are abandoned. Why don't we use them and transform it into something else? I have a project where all the subway, there are like 22 buildings that are exactly the same on top of the different lines of the subway. And there are 2 people working in one building. Many of them are underused or abandoned. And then why don't we go there and take it and use them for different activities? So I think that it's part of what architects should do. You know?
So what you're saying is that sort of ethos of care can be scaled up to have a degree of impact that would be comparable, no, to the previous approach that was more top-down. No?
Yes, because I think that we are in the middle as architects. We're not bottom-up, we're not top-down. We're always in the middle, trying to work with both, with the institutions, with the people, and trying to bring the most out of both. So we as architects have to do many, many things, maybe even if we don't want to do them.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered the question.
No, before we go to another faculty, I'd like to hear from one of the students, perhaps, someone so that Rozana, when she goes back to Mexico City, she said, those wonderful Rice students, they ask such intrepid questions. So please. Yes. This is Lucas, who goes by Lucas.
That is correct. I was really taken by the first video you showed us.
I think that we're not hearing the microphone.
Can you hear me?
It's
otherwise?
Very low. Can you turn it a little low?
Hello?
Now.
Whoa.
Now we hear you.
I was caught in the act. I was taken by the first video that you showed us, where it was sort of an alternation of photo and video. And it was almost like the video took over from the photo, and it seemed as the photo was, it was still, like a photo is, and the video suddenly became inhabited, and there was activity. And I was just wondering where you find that line between the still architecture that you imagine when you're creating it and designing it, and what it ultimately becomes when people inhabit it, and how you imagine that before it happens, or where you find that line between, you know, this permanent structure and this sort of ethereal activity that happens in it. What do you see happening before when you're designing?
I think that you have to open these structures to multifunctional and to different activities where many things can happen, because you don't know how it's going to be taken exactly by a community that you don't know so well, obviously. But with flexibility, I think that flexibility is very important, that you have to have flexibility. And for example, another thing that is very important is that you have to have a human scale. And I think that many of the pilares that have been done have lost scale. And for example, the policeman, which is a woman that's in Pilares, because we have been going there after and after and after. And she was saying, well, you know, I feel like if I was in the patio of my house, or I feel like, I don't know, I feel very comfortable. And I think that she was trying to say that the scale is really human, which many times as architects we forget about scale. And also we were trying to be, you know, like in Mexico we have an amazing weather. You can be outside all the time. And in what we tried to create in Pilares was like a cultural oasis, I said, like and bring vegetation in. And once you're in, really, you can hear the birds, you can hear the animals. Once you're outside, it's like, you know, traffic mess, people shouting. It really feels like you get into another space. You know? You completely change the idea of where you are and bring this green and patios and open spaces. So what we were trying, so to continue with your, we were trying to be flexible. We were trying to be open, that this could work as a multifunctional space. And I think that, for example, we were presenting, I cannot imagine presenting these public projects without people. If there's no people, there's no project. So that's why it was before we finished, I have the pictures that you saw, still images, were taken before it was open. And then obviously, for me, it was really important to see how it worked, how the activities were going, and to really take the pictures with people. I could not imagine taking, and you know, architecture many times is about only the space, but without people. Many of the pictures, and many of the pilares have been shown without people. And I don't understand that part. You know?
One more question? What was it?
Oh, there are more questions. We can, yeah, if we have time. Yeah.
With the Common Unity project, you talked about how the community was hesitant. They told you can't take the gates away. I was curious, what was the process of being able to get them to be comfortable? Because you can draw a drawing or create a representation, and a room of designers might be able to understand that, but it's difficult to explain sometimes ideas to just people who are living their lives saying, yeah, we're going to transform the space, but how do you spark that dialogue so they start to trust you?
Well, it was also really interesting because when they asked us, it was also like 15 architects invited to rehabilitate different housing units. But they told us this was Infonavit. So you cannot go in the site to do the research because we don't want people to think that we're doing something that we're not sure we're going to do it before we did it. And I was like, well, how are we going to do our research and we cannot go in the social housing unit? It was, again, for me, it's like impossible to take pictures of public spaces without people. It was impossible for me to not go in and try to understand how people were living. But again, like, it's common sense. I can say this and it's very obvious, but it's not, because when the other 10 architects presented the projects, many of them said, well, as we couldn't go in from a top-down view, we had to draw this on it. And so we decided to go in saying we were sociologists, we were not architects, and we are, no? We play many roles. So we went in and we said, well, we're sociologists from the university that is in front. We're coming here to see it. So we went in disguised as something else, first of all. And then, after we were permitted to do it, we found a leader, also very important. As I said, there's always a leader. So we find her, we talked with her, we talked with a lot of people. And we did this, what I call site actions, which are actions that are very ludic, low cost, ephemeral, simple, but really transform perception of people from that space. And so we put this tarp saying, what would you like the space to look like? And we also did these map queries, which went more into the qualitative ideas more than the quantitative. No? The quantitative, it's like these surveys that people say, how many light bulbs you have, how many computers. And we were saying, where did you give your first kiss? Where do you smoke? What's your favorite place to play hide and seek? And so this immediately connects, again, in a different way with people. It's not from this top-down view where you're separate because you're asking questions that they're not interested for them. Once you really connect with them in an experience, with experiences, they start trusting you. It's really like, even the sociologist said, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, you're the sociologist. You should tell me how to do it. I'm the architect. And so it was like a lot of visits with the community. Some of them start trusting us. Then we started with that one. And when the other ones that were not opening the spaces saw it, then they accepted it.
Well, thank you, first of all, Rozana, for such a humanistic talk. I enjoyed it very much, but I enjoyed your attitude as an architect, especially with this idea of surprise, because somehow when the title in the act, it involves an idea of surprise. And in several moments in your presentation, you got surprised by your own project somehow. You were in the room, and then after a year, you come back and you have the surprise, or you visit this plaza and suddenly you find the families and you are surprised by the consequences of your project. And sometimes when I talk to my students, I always try to speak to them in a sense that architecture is a lot about precision, about a certain level of control and intention, but you are also bringing the other part, is this aspect of surprise. So I'm interested when you speak about the surprise, if the surprise is because it's something that you would not expect, or it's because it's surprise but it's happening when you were looking for.
Thank you for the question. I like it because I think that serendipity happens all the time in Mexico. It's part of how we live. And I also like this word called happenstance, which I gave a lecture with a friend, with an architect friend, and he told me about this word happenstance, no? Which I didn't know. And happenstance is this idea of by chance. It's by, like this idea by chance, and it relates with the idea of surprise. And I think that it's both. I really get excited when I go back to Pilares and see it active, and like there are some problems because the construction guy didn't do, and I'm fighting with this more like logic and precision and the construction. But when I see it active and like kids playing and seeing how they feel free, and it completely changes, no? So I think that what we do in the office is that we're always trying to feel surprised, no? To feel like kids. I call it this active gaze, which this active gaze is like seeing something with different eyes. So it's like you see it for the first time. And I think that this active gaze has inspired me the whole time. So I get excited. Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.